Hello and welcome back. It has been a couple weeks since I've gone live and teaching classes about listing stuff. So I'm excited to be back. I think this is going to be a great class. Essentially, what I'm going to go over today is the listing appointment through mastering the listing conversation. So, so let's go with reality right now. So reality is that we're in a crazy market. Houses are selling super fast. So you don't necessarily need to be as masterful at the listing appointment as, say, you do in a slower market where you have 45, 60-day market times. I think the biggest thing that is that agents don't have to do right now, at least on a long-term situation, is communicate with the seller about the listing. So in a slower market, we're typically listing the home. We're doing probably a little bit more of a detailed presentation. A lot of times in a slower market, you're in more competition. But in the market that we're in right now, what we're finding out is that what's missing is that 45-day time period, right? So house goes live, house sits on the market for 45 days. Each week you're calling the seller. You're having a conversation with them about how many clicks it's had on Zillow, or how many times an agent's pulled it up in the MLS, or how many showings you've had, and, blah, blah, blah. And then, 30, 45 days later, you're talking about, price reductions. Well, for the most part right now, we're not doing that. Or are we? Maybe just doing it a little bit quicker, like in a weekend. So I think I'm seeing most listings right now, when they go on the market, they'll come on the market on Thursday, they go live on Friday, open to the public, open for real estate agents to show them on Friday and Saturday, possibly an open house on Sunday. And then if you're getting multiple offers, which a lot of homes are, then you're presenting offers at 5 o'clock. Well, what happens when that doesn't work, right? So we had a specific listing this last weekend that we thought we nailed it on price, and did the marketing tool, had probably half the showings we thought that we would have, or that we promised the seller that they would probably get. And come Friday or Saturday or Sunday at 5 o'clock, we had no offers. So what did we have to do? Well, what we did do is I went in, I consulted with the seller, and I said, hey, we missed the mark. What we need to do is we need to reduce the price of the house. And we basically reduced the price by $20,000. So we went from $225 to $205, relisted the house. We didn't do the same thing because the seller was in a situation where they had a contingency on a home. So they had to sell. It was contingent upon their house selling. So essentially they had a 24-hour first right of refusal. It wasn't enacted yet, but the seller was feeling the pressure. So we put the house back on Monday. Lo and behold, on Monday, we get 22 showings. We end up generating 4 offers, and the house did not sell for any more than $205,000. Well, actually, it sold for $205,100. We did have an offer that would escalate. Actually, had a no cap on the escalation, but at the same time, that's kind of where we're seeing the market right now. It's very micro market. It means it's moving really fast. And it amazes me on when you see houses that are on the market for 8, 9, 10 days, and they haven't done anything to them. Gang, if you're in a market where the average market time is a day, you need to do a price reduction a lot sooner. So anyhow, that's all I've got on that. If you guys agree with me, or however your market is working, if you have any experiences, put it in the comments. And the one thing that I always want to say, because all of you that log into this know that I'm a coach. And so if you happen to be earning less than you wish you were, and you're open to the idea of receiving some help, I would absolutely love to have a conversation with you. we typically, the way that it works is I would send you what I call a blueprint questionnaire, which kind of goes through all the systems that we teach. And then you fill that out. Then we have an hour conversation, and then we go from there on whether or not if coaching is for you. I never sell you on coaching, but the one thing that I will do is explain what it is. And it may not be for you right now, but it might be for you down the road. So anyhow, that's all I got. At least that's all I got. That was my sales pitch. So let's do some training. Let me pull up my slides here. Hang on just a sec. All right, there we go. There we go. All right. So this week we're essentially covering mastering the listing conversation. So you guys have heard me before. When you're the idea is taking control, right? So you should have some type of a system in place. I think a lot of times you could have a PowerPoint presentation, but that's kind of well into the listing conversation, well into the listing presentation, if you will. So the one thing I always want you to be thinking about is, when you go, so you're on the phone, you schedule the appointment, the seller wants to sell. It's not a consultation. It's actually that they want to sell their house. They're ready to put a sign in the yard. So we all know that there are, situations where somebody says, hey, we're thinking about selling. And you go over to the house, you're consulting them, giving them ideas about their house, but you're not actually physically putting it on the market. This is when you are actually going over there to stick a sign in the yard. The seller's feeling a certain way. So typically when you're going over there, they're feeling a little anxious, right? So it could be, well, we're not going to pay a full commission. We're not going to list our house for any more than a week. Whatever, things are going on. The house is dirty. Those of you that have been in the business a while know that when you go over to the house, typically when you schedule something, the big excuse on why they don't want you to come over is because they need to clean it up. It's like, right, really? Trust me, we've seen worse. So the idea is that when you get over there, you want the seller to start to feel comfortable, right? Comfortable with you, comfortable with your process. And then also too, at the same time, you want them to feel a little concerned about maybe some things that they weren't necessarily concerned about before you went over to the house. And then you want them to be convinced. By the time you're all done, they are convinced that you are the agent of choice. So how's the agent feeling? How are you feeling, when this is all happening? Well, you in essence, you're feeling a little anxious, right? I mean, sure hope they like me. Man, I hope they pay me a full commission. All of these things are typically going on. Now, even in the master, the agent who's mastered this business, who's been in the business for 23 years, you still are a little anxious, especially when you're going over to somebody's house that maybe you have not met yet, that is a referral of somebody that you know, but you don't know them yet. So there's a little anxiety that goes on there. And then number two, you need to feel comfortable with, once you get there in a very relatively short period of time, you need to feel comfortable. Just imagine that if you're going to go do a talk and you're going to be in front of 200 people, would you feel more comfortable if you were prepared or if you just showed up and you had no clue what the subject was you were going to talk about? So yeah, and the subject is their home. The subject is the market. The subject is, what is their motivation in wanting to get the house sold? So you need to feel comfortable. And then you need to be concerned about things that maybe you weren't concerned about before. And then by the time you're all done with your presentation, you need to be convinced that you're going to be able to help them. Even if you do take the house a little bit higher price than maybe you thought you were going to take it at, or that you feel that the market is saying, you need to be convinced that and comfortable that the seller that you're going to get into a listing contract is going to be coachable. Okay. And then in regards to taking control of the listing appointment, those of you that have ever been in class with me, I kind of have fun with this. But the first thing you're going to do is ring the bell, right? So you're going to ring the bell. I don't know how simple to get. If the bell doesn't work, knock. right? Okay, anyhow, that was supposed to be funny. And then you're going to smile, right? Because everybody likes a smile. Nobody likes a grumpy real estate agent. And then you're going to pay them a compliment. What could you pay them a compliment about? It could be the landscaping, right? It could be the siding. It could be that they just painted the house. It could be where it's located. It's down the street from the school. If you can't think of anything, it could be as simple as, you know what, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I just want to show some gratitude and appreciation for you actually inviting me over this evening. I'm really excited to get to know you and to potentially help you guys with the sell of your home. It could be something like that, just showing gratitude for something. You could say something about their landscaping, like, wow, this is great landscaping. Did you do this yourself, or did you have this professionally done? So, you know, I mean, just anyhow. So you're ringing the bell, you're smiling. Don't get those two things mixed up. You don't want to have a big smile on your face walking up the door and they're peeking out with this goofy person walking up to the door with a big smile on their face. So wait to do your big smile when they answer the door. All right. And then you're going to take them to the kitchen table. Why the kitchen table? Because the kitchen table is where people break bread. It's where people make big decisions. And it's where you're going to be able to do your presentation the best. Okay. I've had people say, well, Gary, what if they don't have a kitchen table? Well, I don't know. Go to the counter. I don't know. Did you pack your folding table and chairs? I don't know. Go into the living room, figure it out. Right. I'm just saying the best place to have that listing presentation is at the kitchen table. Then you're going to break the ice. So once you go to the kitchen table, and actually breaking the ice actually starts as you go through the house, meaning that you're going from the front door to the kitchen table. You're not touring the home yet. You're not putting your bags down and then saying, hey, let's take a tour. Or the seller says, hey, let me show you the house. Then now they're in control. So you want to go to the kitchen table. Yes, you do want to take a look at the house, but you don't want to do the wrong thing, the right thing at the wrong time, okay? And then POCA, right? POCA is preview of coming attractions. And I'll go over that. That's in your actual listing presentation. So ring the bell, smile, pay them a compliment, take them to the kitchen table where you're going to break the ice and you're going to POCA. This is all of the start of mastering the listing conversation. It's being in control, because if you're not in control at the beginning, you're not going to be able to have the listing conversation at all. And you're not going to be in control of it. So if you're not in control of it, then you're not going to master it. Okay. So these are just some ideas. If what you're doing is working, then don't change it. Hey, just for fun, if you guys can, or I think it might be over there, or over there. I don't know. But post in there, help me out, because I get more like algorithms or something if somebody's posting, commenting, liking, whatever the case may be. But I know that you're just sitting there watching. I got about 8 or 9 of you kind of in here watching this. But if you guys can just introduce yourself, maybe even say, wow, this is great stuff, or man, Gary, this is crap, whatever you want. But all right, so you're sitting at the kitchen table. You are breaking the ice. And then you're going to bridge into your presentation. And the way that you're going to do that, this is basically the setup for the preview of coming attractions. Okay. So the setup is essentially, when a lot of people ask me, well, when are you done breaking the ice? Well, to me, when you're done breaking the ice is that, you started the conversation. You're obviously asking them about how they're doing, how life's going, blah, blah, blah. We're not in our listing questions yet, but we're just talking about anything other than real estate. And once you can get them giggling, maybe they're offering you a glass of water or a cocktail, I don't know, whatever it is. But it's a feeling that you're kind of sitting back in your chair, they're sitting back in their chair, and then you're going to lean in and you're going to say, you know what, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, before we begin, may I share with you how I work? That's the first step. That's getting permission. So, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, before we begin, may I share with you how I work? Then the next one is, and then they're going to say yes. And when they say yes, that's them handing you control. And then you're going to want to go to the next step, which is, I want to reassure you this evening, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, that I'm not here for the sheer sake of listing your home, because any agent could honestly do that. By the way, are you familiar with what we call the expired list? Oh, you're not? Well, basically what it is, it's a list of people who have basically two things, and actually sellers who had two things in common. The first thing that they had in common is that that essentially that they didn't get their house sold, and so they were unable to go through with their plans. And so, in my opinion only, I feel that the agent and that particular seller should have never gotten into that relationship, because obviously communication dropped down if they were unable to go through with their plans and the listing canceled. Would you agree, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, that we don't want to end up on this list, this expired list? Oh, okay. Yeah. So what I just did there is I reassured them that I'm not just there to take the listing. Okay. And also too, that I introduced the fear of loss. Fear of loss is the greater motivator than the opportunity to gain. Most sellers will do what they have to do to stay off of a expired list, but they won't do what they need to do to get on a sold list. And that's marketing your home, that's pricing your home, that's everything. If you use the fear of loss whenever you introduce anything, then they're going to be more apt to go in your direction. So I want to reassure you, I'm not here for the sheer sake of taking a listing, because any real estate agent could do that. By the way, are you familiar with the expired list? Well, what it is, it's a list of sellers who had two things in common. The first thing they had in common is the buyer or the seller and the agent should have never gotten into that relationship. And then also too, they were unable to go through with their plans. Obviously some communication broke down, and they were unable to, go to Arizona. They were unable to buy that next house, whatever the case may be. Would you agree that we want to do everything we possibly can to stay off of this list? And they're going to say, well, yeah, nobody's ever going to say, no, my goal is to list my house, and it is to then get on the expired list. That's nobody's goal. And I'll tell you right now that the agents that are on this, if you're listening to this, by far, I would say 10 out of 10 real estate agents, unless you've gone through my training, unless you've gone through a Floyd Wickman training, unless you've gone through some type of training like that, you're not using these dialogues. But this is truly how you master the listing conversation. And then, so we go through. So would you agree that we don't want to be on this list, which is the expired list? They say, yeah, absolutely want to be on that list. Then you say, well, that's great, because I don't want you to be on that list either. So what I've done is I've created a 5-step infallible process that literally takes the guesswork out of whether or not you and I should do business this evening. 5-step infallible process, right? So now I'm talking to both of them, right? I'm talking to the emotional with the word infallible. We all know what infallible means. It means it's got to work. It's sure-proof. It's bulletproof, okay? And process, I'm talking to the analytical, because the analyticals love step by step. They love a process. So anyhow, hey, Keisha, how are you doing? I see Keisha. Thank you so much for saying hi. I appreciate that. What city are you in, Keisha? Post that up so everybody knows where Keisha's from. So the next step is going to be the infallible process, right? So step number 1, you're sitting, just got to remember, you're sitting down with them at the kitchen table. You've got your laptop presentation open. You built rapport with them by breaking the ice. You said, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, before we begin, may I share with you where I work? You reassured them. You introduced the fear of loss, and then you basically introduced your process, and you asked for permission to share it with them. They said yes. Again, that's them handing over control. So step number 1, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I talked with Mr. Seller before I came over here the other night and asked you a series of questions to essentially find out, about your home, about your guys' situation. Well, I'm going to go through those questions again, since I got Mrs. Seller here, and want to just make sure that we're all on the same page. And I really want to get a crystal clear picture on exactly what you guys want to accomplish here. I know you want to get the house sold, but more important to me is really understanding what your goals are. And then once we understand that, then we'll get up, we'll get up and walk around your property. And what I would like you to do is I would like you to show me the property as if you would a buyer. Okay. And with your permission, I would love to be able to maybe point out some things that possibly is going to make your home a little bit more sellable. And then what we'll do is we'll come back to the kitchen table, and then we'll go through a customized marketing plan. Now, you have 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and 2-car garages, and there's a lot of those homes currently on the market right now. And a lot of those that have sold. But I want to know exactly why you guys bought the house, the things that you put in the home, what has been so great about the area and everything else, because that's what I want to use to be able to market your home. Okay, not just a generic marketing plan. And then what we'll do is we'll talk about price and estimate of net, which I know that that's important to you. It's probably one of the main reasons why you brought me over here, was to know what your value of your home is. And then once we do come up with value, we'll go through a net sheet and essentially know exactly how much money you're going to walk away with. And to be honest with you, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, most sellers are more interested in the net than what they even pay me. Would you agree with that? I know that what I make is going to actually be in that net figure, but you just want to make sure that you have enough money to be able to make that next move. So, and then we'll go over all the forms, all the contracts, be able to explain those in detail, have you ask any questions, and we'll go through all the details as far as, signs and marketing and all that type of stuff. And then obviously the timing of how long all this takes and when things happen within the process. And then hopefully by the time we are all done, we will be able to come up with a mutual decision on whether or not you and I should do business. Well, at the end of the day, do you want to do business with me? And hopefully I can answer all your questions, but I've got to make that decision on whether or not I can help you too. Ooh, what did I just do there? That's kind of fear of loss, right? Most people, real estate agents, they're going over there wanting a listing, no matter what it's priced at, any of that type of stuff. They're not going through any kind of a process. Really, their major tool that they have when they go over to the house is a CMA. And that's furthest thing. You never, ever want to talk about price to a seller until they are sold on you and your company. Let me say that again. You never want to talk about price until they are sold on you and your company. And the way that you do that is by following a process. Okay. All right. So that's the preview. That's the POCA. That's the preview of coming attractions. So now we sat down, we opened up our laptop, we went through this with them step by step. Now we're going to pull out our list of questions. So my suggestion is you pull out your list of questions and you have those pre-printed. If anything, you went over most of these questions with them when you were on the phone with one of them. So now you're not going to ask the questions again, but you're going to reiterate the questions. Like, Mr. Seller, I talked with you on the phone the other night, and I asked you about, just now that we're on the same page, all on the same page, I want to kind of make sure that I've got the right answers. And then you're going to go through that. But before I actually jump into the questions, I want to talk about a way of asking the question. So, and I don't know if anybody's ever heard of Neil Rackham, who wrote the book Spin Selling. Essentially, you and I are in this sales business, right? And so there's always going to be a certain resistance right off the bat from anybody. Okay. I mean, heck, if you look at a lot of magazines, when they rank professions or, untrusted professions, real estate agents actually rank right underneath a used car salesman. So we've got a lot of work to do when we go in and do a listing presentation and work with people. So for the most part, their defenses are up. Okay. Again, referrals are better than if you're going to go to a FSBO or you're going to go to somebody that maybe called you off of a sign or something like that. So, but what if there was a magic way that you could get everybody dying to do business with you before you even sell them on doing business with you? Wouldn't that be cool? I don't know. I mean, that's the reason why you're on this call right now, is because hopefully that's what I'm going to teach you. If you do business like everybody else, okay, if there's no difference between you and your competition, then here's the challenge. You're going to have to compete on what? You're going to have to compete on price. You're going to have to say, yeah, me, and more for lesser price, okay? Because again, most real estate agents, that's the biggest thing, is the worry is, am I worth the commission that I'm charging? That's how we all compete with our competition. That's how most agents compete. They are forced to because of the circumstances, right? So what I want to share with you today is to basically make you look as that you're clearly different in your client's mind than anybody else that they're going to ever talk to. So let's go through. And the book Spin Selling is actually, it's probably one of the most boringest books you've ever read or will ever read, but it is a really good sales book. So let's go. Let me go to the next slide here. Let's see here. Let's go. All right. So Rackham came up with a study called the Hathaway Study. Okay. And I think it was a company, I think it was IBM. I'm not for sure, but he was hired by a Fortune 500 company, and he followed their salespeople around and tried to identify what their extremely successful salespeople were doing right and what their unsuccessful salespeople were doing wrong, then try and quantify, if he could, and see if the right stuff was teachable to the unsuccessful salespeople. So, but before they did that, they needed a common language. So they came up with a language, and, the first thing was preliminaries, right? Preliminaries are rapport builders, right? Hey, that's your bowling trophy, or you see a picture up and you're basically talking about anything other than real estate. Okay. You're trying to get to know them. And that's more so, the building rapport. Right. Then you have your questions, right? Questions, and you're qualifying them, and you're trying to find out what their motivation is and all that type of stuff. Then you have your product demonstration. That's our listing presentation, right? Never show somebody something that you can, or never tell somebody something that you can show them. And then you have closing, right? You're going to close on them. And one thing, if I were standing in front of you right now and get ready to type something, okay? Because I want to see if anybody can get the answer to this. Okay, so if you looked at preliminaries, you looked at questions, and if you were a broker, okay, if you were a broker of a real estate company, okay, you owned a company and you're going to bring in a trainer to train your real estate agents, and you had enough money to teach them one of these four things, and you're going to focus on one, okay? Is it preliminaries? Is it, rapport building techniques? Is it questions, asking them questions? Is it a product demonstration, a listing presentation? Or are you going to want to teach them how to close on their clients? So if you guys could, I want you to type in the comments, what do you think it is? I'll give you a few seconds. So go ahead and type in the comments what you think it is. Man, Are you guys just all driving in your cars or something? You not in front of your computers? All right. So for the most part, if I'm in front of a class, last class I was in front of, it seemed like forever, had about 100 people. Yes, Keisha, thank you for, I'm going to have some kind of a prize for you, Keisha, for interacting. But you're right, closing, but you are completely wrong. Closing is the number one thing that everybody thinks that they need to know. But what Hathaway found out was is questions. Grant, you are correct. Questions is the one thing. So anyhow, so Hathaway was with this Fortune 500 company. He came back to them, to the leaders of the company, and said, you know, hey, it's questions. We got to figure out which questions that the people that are successful are asking and teach that to. And they said they had preconceived notions. They thought it should have been closing. So they said nope. They fired him. And so what he did is he took a 10-year period. He went on, I think it was over 35,000 sales calls over 10 years, and came up with the same results, that it's the questions that are being asked. So when you look at this, it's, you know, the Hathaway study basically said questions persuade more powerfully than any other verbal behavior. The more questions asked, the more successful the interaction between client and salesperson. Okay, so it's a matter of how you ask the questions, what kind of questions that you're asking. So the one thing, the biggest question ever. So here's what I want you to think. Seller, you're going to seller's house, okay? Every seller's thinking the same thing. Wow, 7% commission, 6% commission, whatever it is. They've got a $300,000 house. You're going to charge them 7%. You're going to pay them $21,000. Okay. Now they think they're paying you the full 21. You got to kind of set the record straight with them on where that commission is all going. But at the same time, they're still paying $21,000 out of their 300 that they're going to get. Okay. And that's the reason why most every for sale by owner is a for sale by owner, is because of the commission situation. Now, every once in a while, it's because they had a bad experience, but for the most part, it is the commission. Okay. So what our job as salespeople is to do is to tip the scale, right? Is to go in there and get them to think about things that they weren't thinking about before we showed up, right? Because here's what they're thinking. Every seller's thinking, especially in a market when houses are selling in a day, right? They think the only value that you have is putting it on the MLS, marketing the home, negotiating a deal, which, you know, negotiating the deal, that's part of it. Creating a multiple offer situation is huge right now in today's market, and for sale by owners can't do that, nor can they navigate through that type of a situation, at least professionally. Okay. But where the value comes in is how you're going to get that sucker closed, right? So once you do get an offer, getting it all the way to close, because a lot of things are out of your hands. You're just kind of overlooking the process, right? So what you need to get them to think about is there could be some problems. Right now, the seller's thinking, you're going to stick a sign in my yard. You're going to get it sold in a day because this is the best house that's coming on the market right now, is what they all think. And so now you need to get them to think a little bit differently. So the cost of the solution right now, let's just use 6%. You tell them 6%, you must be kidding, is what they're thinking. That is absolutely nuts, because again, they're not thinking about potential challenges that could come up. So you're going to start to interject certain things through your questioning, and, you know, like one, they could run out of time. They could run out of time. I know that right now in the market that we're in, if somebody overprices their house, they don't pay a full commission, they don't hire a real estate agent, they could run out of time, because it could take them forever to get their home sold, especially since it's not on the open market. Just so you know, FSBOs are not on the open market. They could potentially lose money by not hiring a real estate agent, by not paying a 6% commission, by not putting it in the MLS. They may have to move twice, right? So these are all the types of situations that could come up, or a few of the situations that could come up. And they're thinking, holy cow, I never thought of it that way, or I never thought of that before. So those are the things that you need to start to interject, right? And so we call it soft selling. Okay, so the S stands for what is their situation, right? So you're going to ask a series of questions to really understand what their situation is or what their motivation is on why they're moving in the first place. And then there's the O, which is a possible future problem. You have to interject that. They're never thinking that there's going to be a problem because they have the best house. They're on the best street. They're on the best lot. They're on the best whatever. There's no way they're going to have any problems getting their home sold. And then the F's is basically fear, right? So it's a time or a money problem that they potentially could have a time problem. They potentially could have a money problem, right? And then the T, you basically want to tie down, right? So you're putting yourself in the picture. S is situation, O is obstacle, F is fear of loss, T is tie down, okay? So then basically you've stacked them, and that's what the Hathaway Study did, is they created a process called stacking. And so essentially that's what I'm calling this here, is basically that you've stacked them. So situation questions. So what are the questions we always ask when we are sitting with a seller or we're on the phone prepping for a listing appointment, right? So where are you moving to? When do you have to be there? What type of home are you looking for there? Have you found one yet? How much do you need from the sale of this one to buy the next one? But the ultimate question to ask is, what would it take? What would it take to list your house this evening? Because that's the one thing that gets down. Now, you're going to ask a bunch of questions and you need all the answers to the questions. And just so you know, a lot of times you have to ask these questions in order to get the answers. But sometimes there's sellers that you ask one question, hi, or how are you? And they give you all the answers. It just all depends. You just need the answers to these questions, okay? And so a couple other questions that I don't have up here that I would ask. Okay. One is, are you thinking about trying to sell it on your own? And then the other one is, are you currently interviewing any other real estate agents? So those are a couple questions that you want to know. I feel that you want to know in advance before I even go over to the house. So, because when do you handle an objection? Well, usually before it comes up, right? So these are the situational questions. And when you're interviewing or questioning somebody, you're not interrogating them. Like, where are you moving to? When do you have to be there? It's where are you moving to? And then they give you an answer and you say, oh, and then you go deeper with that. So why are you guys choosing to move there? Oh, okay. So a job. So what kind of job, what do you do for a living? Oh, okay. Are you going to be doing the same thing where you go there? Oh, okay. And then you're going, oh, and oohs and ahs, and you're kind of giggling and you're laughing and you're getting them engaged, right? God gave us one of these and he gave us two of these. So basically, be more interested than interesting. Ask them questions. Get more detail about the answers that come out, okay? That's also how they are going to like you, okay? People like it when you listen to what they have to say, and they're the ones doing the talking. So make sure. Now, it's not that you're not going to be doing a little bit of talking in here about what you do, but at the same time, you always want to be conscious that you're not doing all the talking, and you want to get them engaged, and you want to say things like, so would something like that be of value to you? Or how does that sound? Getting them engaged about something that you just said. So anyhow, let's go to the next thing. So the obstacle, how are you going to put an obstacle in there? So equals a possible future problem. So what would it do to your plans if you couldn't sell your house? So for me, I'm going through these questions. I may throw in there, so Mr. and Mrs. Seller, you know what? I just want to ask a quick question. Tell me this, what would it do to your plans if you are unable to sell your house right now. So things are going to come out like, what are you talking about? You're not going to be able to get our house sold. What's wrong with our house? Is it not going to sell? Whatever. No. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that if, have you ever thought about that if it does not sell, maybe if it doesn't even sell in the time frame that you guys are kind of putting a timeline you're putting on yourself, would that throw up any problems? Well, yeah, we want to be down in Arizona and so they're going to give you an answer. You just want to listen to what that is. Okay. Then could you lose the other one, meaning another house, they may have put their house down? I mean, just to give you a classic example, just this weekend, we listed that house. At the same time we had it on the market, they found one that they liked. They have to make it contingent upon the house that they're selling because they need the equity from that to buy the next one. So we found a house that they fell in love with. It was a little overpriced because it had been on the market for 10 days. We wrote an offer, went a little bit lower, made it contingent upon the successful sell of their home. They accepted it. They countered back with a 24-hour first right of refusal, which is fine. Nobody else is looking at the house, but it now makes my client, my seller, who was the buyer of that house, a lot of urgency on them. And so they're more apt to reduce the price and all that type of stuff because they did not want to lose that home. Right. So thinking about that, she's like, the Mrs. Seller was like, oh my God, we can't lose this house. This is the perfect house. It's perfect location. It's exactly what we want. All of that type of stuff. So that's going to make somebody think a little bit differently. So you got to put those future potential problems in there. And then, basically always remember why we're asking these questions, right? You're going back to the expired list, right? So if somebody says to you, well, hey, we don't want to put a sign in our yard. Well, okay, well, that's not a problem. By the way, why don't you want to put a sign in your yard? What's the biggest challenge of putting a sign in your yard? Whatever they say, it doesn't matter. Then just say, you know what, there was, you remember the expired list that I showed you? Well, you know what, there were a few other people on this expired list that were thinking exactly the same way you were thinking. We don't want to put a sign in our yard. And they ended up on the expired list. So let me ask you this. Are you really hung up on, whatever, a lot of times, not a lot of times, some of the times, the expired, even though you have the expired list, it doesn't work. They just don't want to sign in their yard. And that could be a luxury home or whatever. And then just any other situation, price reductions, fixing something in a house, you always can go back to that expired list. Again, that's the fear of loss. So let's say you couldn't go through with your plans and your house did not sell. How would you be feeling? And then you just shut up. You let them answer this, okay? Because again, you're putting them in the future. And then how upset would you be? What would you tell your family? What would you tell your kids if they weren't able to go to that school or go live over across town by that park or whatever, because they've already seen the house, they've already written an offer on it, blah, blah, blah. And then you want to tie it all down, and you're basically putting yourself in the picture. Well, I guess Mr. and Mrs. Seller, if we were to join forces, part of my job would be to make sure that your home did sell in enough time so that you didn't lose out on the home that you've already written an offer on. Would that be part of my job? Okay, great. And then also to be able to get you enough money to be able to make the move. And possibly a little extra to be able to maybe buy some new furnishings for the house and stuff like that. Would that be part of my job? It would be. Okay, great. And so if I'm able to do all of this, get the house sold enough time so you don't lose out on the other one, get you enough money, would there be anything else that would be holding you back from listing your house this evening? That's how you're asking that question. And that's the same thing as asking, what would it take for me to list your home? We found out the things that they want to make sure and what's important to them. And now I'm going to put myself in as the solution to the problem. And then I'm going to close on them before I talk about price, estimate of net, all of that type of stuff, right? So let's see here. Hang on. Oh, all right. You don't get this little money. You don't end up losing the house. Don't have to explain to your family feelings of frustration. That would be my job. So basically, you are just taking everything that they said. You're injecting yourself into being the solution to make sure that that stuff happens. And if all that stuff does happen, that they, what is there anything else that would be stopping them from listing their home this evening? You've got to get a yes or a no to that question. Okay. All right. So, all right. So again, that was same thing. I just summarized, and then, well, that's not next week. So I didn't change that slide, but that's okay. Actually, next week on Tuesday, we're not doing anything. But I did want to introduce, let's see, let me pull up my calendar real quick. On the following Tuesday, which would be the 18th, we are going to start a series for the next 8 weeks, kind of taking us through into the holidays. And I may even try to extend this out through the end of the year. But I'm going to be interviewing top real estate agents. And when I say top, I mean the agents that are making things happen right now, not necessarily an agent that closed 150 transactions or has closed 60 transactions so far this year, but somebody that's really got their business rocking and rolling right now. Because I think they have some really interesting concepts of how to generate business in, honestly, in any market, but more specifically in kind of the civil unrest that's going on, and then also with COVID. And we're going to have people from the West Coast, we're going to have people from the East Coast, we're going to have people from the Midwest, maybe even down in the Sun Belt states. So we're going to have a good mix of real estate agents that I think will be a good fit. We'll continue with our training on Thursdays and at 1 o'clock Central Standard Time. And again, I want to thank all of you for taking the time out of your day to listen to me chat about real estate and some concepts on how to get a little bit better with your business, with your trade. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the comments. I would love to help you. If you could help me out, share this with any other agent that you think that may find value to this. I'd greatly appreciate it. So thanks a lot, and make it a fantastic week. We'll talk to you soon.